You guys, I have such a great episode for you today. It is going to be a total treat. I love when I have guests who go deep and are willing to just quickly get to the heart of it all and really connect the dots on the inner work. And that is exactly what we did in the interview that I had with Amber Romaniuk. She is an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert with 10 years of experience. She helps high achieving women create a level of body confidence, intuition, and optimal health through powerful mindset healing, self care, and overcoming self sabotage with food. Her story is super interesting because she overcame emotional eating after gaining and losing more than 1,000 pounds and spending over $50,000 on binge foods and spending 5 years balancing her hormones and digestion. She also dismantled deep limiting beliefs and behaviors that kept her stuck in looping patterns. You guys are going to love Amber. You're going to love the way that she connects the dots between food, money, inner child, and all of the above. So let's dive right in. Welcome to the Joyous Path to Millions podcast with me, your host, Emily June Wilcox, serial entrepreneur, 7-figure business owner, mindset junkie, creator of the Money Wound Medicine program, devoted mama of 2, and lover of coffee and crystals. My mission is to put more money in the hands of soulpreneurs through healing money wounds, building abundant businesses, and balancing masculine and feminine energy. When we do this, we collectively up-level the frequency of the planet and help usher in new paradigm wealth. Each week, a new episode will air featuring expert advice, live coaching, and guest interviews where we'll dive into honest money conversations and the behind-the-scenes truth of building our aligned fempires. We all deserve a healthy, empowered relationship with money so we can experience more freedom, pleasure, and joy on our joyous path to millions. So get ready and let's dive in. Amber, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here with you today, Emily.
Yeah. So you have gained and lost, what did you say, like over 1,000 pounds and spent more than $50,000 on binge foods? Okay. Yeah. I can already tell, like, I just love that you included that in your bio because I can tell you're a numbers girl like me. Like, let's add it all up. Let's see if we can quantify this. And to me, like, there's something so freeing about taking the thing that like would be the most shameful and just saying like, this is what it is. So I'm so curious to learn more about your story because I suspect that you never imagined that probably the thing that was like the source of all of, I don't know, like the angst and frustration in your life would end up being your career.
That is very true. I never imagined my goal when I was in high school was to be an entertainment reporter. So it kind of like life took a whole 180 when I fell deep into a binge eating food addiction cycle. And so for me, yeah, like what really accumulated to those numbers was a few things. And the first thing was I started struggling with body image issues at the age of 5. My first day on the bus, the older boys called me fat and ugly, and then the whole bus made fun of me. And that really hit my confidence. And I really, took on that identity thereafter for the next 20 plus years. And growing up, my mom had multiple sclerosis. And so we would compensate a lot of things she couldn't do because of her condition. We would eat. And then, I never really knew how to be confident or manage money or like eat well or any of those things. And it's no one's fault, but I never learned any of those things. And so it was just like this unconscious emotional eating all through my teens, having body image struggles. Obviously, when you start comparing yourself to photoshopped images in a magazine and you don't know they're photoshopped, it creates all kinds of mental, emotional, negative self-talk and unworthiness stuff. And then in my early 20s, I had a bad breakup, couldn't eat, lost weight really fast, got the quote unquote perfect body, but nothing improved. I thought that if I could just be 125 pounds, like my life would be perfect, but nothing got better. Yeah. And I became more critical, started working out 2 hours a day and under eating and then one day it was just like, I can't keep this up. And I had my first binge and then fall into that cycle where I gained like 70 pounds in 4 months. And then this cycle of gaining and losing 20, 30, 40 pounds every other month and then losing it again, and via restriction and exercise and going back and forth, really threw me into a massive state of self-sabotage, food addiction, binging and purging, emotional eating. And I spent a lot of money that I didn't have on binge foods and quick fixes. Like I got a personal trainer for $5,000 because I thought if they can motivate me,
Yeah.
if I've spent this money, like I won't binge because I'm going to these, training sessions and it's really intense. But after the second session, I stopped going because I was binging and gaining weight again and I was too embarrassed to go back. So there goes $5,000, right? So it became very easy to mindlessly spend money that I didn't have. And it accumulated really fast to that 5 years and $50,000 and the ups and downs with the weight. And then it was like I had my garbage can low point moment where I ended up eating out of my garbage can one night. It was just like an embarrassing, horrifying moment to sit on the ground and go, I just ate food out of my garbage can because that's how addicted I am to it. But that's what I needed to happen because I was in this comfort zone of familiarity. I was in this denial that the binge eating and the self-sabotage wasn't that big of a deal, even though it was massively costing me emotionally, financially, physically, energetically, like in every aspect of my being to keep tolerating that behavior. And so that moment crushed all my fears of the unknown, fear of change, fear of failure. Who would I be if I go on the journey? What is it going to look like? And I got really uncomfortable in that moment. And when I'm done, like, I have to figure this out. I can't keep doing this. This isn't meant to be my life. And that's where the healing, dove in. And I really did a lot of physical healing. And then the emotional healing came up, to really work on my low self-worth, my lack mentality, my people pleasing and perfection, and all the diet and food rules. And then I started to feel my intuition come online. And it's funny because I went through a phase where I stopped binging, but I started going to the mall and like mindlessly spending money on clothes. So I could see where the behavior just would like morph and shift, and my bank account just stayed in the red all the time. And sometimes it would be like gas or binge food, and I would pick the binge food. So that was like how deep in I was with it. So that whole journey really inspired me, as I healed and I overcame it, to realize, wow, so many women are struggling with this. Maybe not everyone as intensively with me or worse than me, but holy moly, I think this is why I'm actually here. And then that's where the business was birthed 10 and a half years ago. And I thought that like the binge eating and emotional eating was a ride. And then you get into business and all of your like money insecurities start coming up to work on and all of that stuff. And it's like a whole other level of healing. So yeah, that's kind of like the short version of the story, but that's what got me to start the business.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, as you were talking about, like, hiring the trainer and just thinking like, "Oh, they'll fix it all for me," and then it
Yeah.
didn't work, I was like, "Wow, we do that in business all the freaking time." Like,
Yep.
"I'm just gonna hire this coach," or, "This person said that they made $100,000 in 1 minute, and if I follow their 10-step plan, I'll be able to do the same thing."
Yeah,
And
totally. And if I drop 50K for a 3 month thing, I'm going to hit a million because they hit a million and then like nothing changes. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and then
been
you
there.
just feel more broken and more
Yeah,
shameful.
totally.
What a wild ride. Like, what a journey. Okay, this is what I always get curious about is sometimes when we tell these stories in broad strokes, it makes it sound really linear. And yet, I'm sure, you probably had a job, you had some source of income, and this business, just wasn't magically like full of clients and people throwing money at you. So, what did it look like for you to make that transition?
Yeah. So essentially, I was working as a front desk assistant at a health clinic when I was going to school, like getting my natural nutrition. And then I got fired for no reason. And I actually thought I was going to be able to start my practice there. So then I ended up at another health clinic doing assistant work, and then found a healing center that was like, hey, we want you to come and like start your practice here. And so for me, I was actually very lucky because through this transition, Obviously, yeah, I was not really making any money. And so I was gracious enough to actually have my dad support me through the first year of my business, and just helping me along a little bit where I needed it, to cover things that I obviously wasn't able to pay for. So I'm very grateful
Yeah.
that I had that support. And it was essentially like, I've got a year, I need to make shit happen and like really get established. And so I was networking like crazy. I joined business networking groups. I started like connecting with different like places in my city to like collaborate, start referral partnerships. I was in serious hustle mode, and in the first like 8 or 9 months, nothing was really coming into like transmuting. Like I'd get the odd client, but they'd come for a session and then wouldn't come back. And then about 10 months into my business, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like I literally made, I don't know, $15,000, $20,000 this year. Like I can't, this isn't sustainable. I don't know how I'm going to figure this out, but I know this is what I meant to do. And actually, one of the things that did help me get the business off the ground was investing in a really good business coach at the time
Yeah.
who helped me build the packages and the programs to bring people in and help them commit.
Yeah.
And also start to set the boundaries of like, what are the aligned things that feel really good for me to spend time and energy on, and what are not, to open up more time and space for me to build that. But as soon as I essentially hired the coach, I actually ended up moving my practice to a gym where I was just like doing a 30-70 split. But I got a ton of client referrals being there, and then was able to establish a lot more. And I'm so grateful, in my second year of business, I hit over 6 figures. So
Wow.
that's how it started. I'm very grateful that I had my dad's support. And at the same time, I had to work through a lot of shame and guilt of that, like, having that support, and then having the fear of like, holy crap, I hope it never fails, because I'm probably not going to be able to get help again. Like
Right.
there's so much emotion there to work through.
And do you feel like a lot of the lessons that you learned through your journey with your body and like being able to trust yourself around food and realizing that like no one was going to come save you, that you had to do the inner work, like did a lot of that translate into business, or did you feel like you kind of had to learn those lessons a second time?
I think some of it definitely translated, but I think one of the things that happened is, I definitely think you can go through a phase in your business where you can become asphyxiated with chasing numbers rather than like really focusing on being of service. And I've always been so passionate about being of service. But when you're in this like container where someone's like, okay, set weekly goals, monthly goals, yearly goals, how are you going to reach that? And I haven't fully claimed my power yet. I'm going, oh, this is the way, and I need to focus on like making money, and how am I going to, make all these different incomes. And so I think that was something that I really had to dismantle over the last few years after like getting out of that kind of a container, because what I started to realize is part of my ego was really fed, when I first started my business and started hitting over 6 figures, of like, I own a business, like I'm a multi 6 figure business owner, like look at me. And it's like, no, that's not what this is about. Like I'm celebrating the success, but I'm so here to help women through what I went through and beyond.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest gift. And so the last few years, I've really had to work on dismantling my ego in my business. And I think part of that is just stuff that I brought into the business, and then just like different coaches and mentors that I admittedly like gave my power away to, and like was in that kind of fixing mentality of like, they're going to help like be the thing that helps me grow my business. It's like, no, that's my responsibility. I can take certain things on, but at the end of the day, like I've got to use my discernment, what feels right for me, what doesn't. And I think through the first few years of my business, I didn't know that, because like this person that I was working with had helped me so much. But then I started to realize it's not about them. They don't like dictate the success or the trajectory of my business. I do. So I need to start owning that and claiming that for myself.
Yes. Well, and it's like you talked about, chasing calories, like that being a number to fixate on,
Yeah.
and then just sort of replacing that with chasing dollars and focusing
Yeah.
on income. And and I think there are so many parallels there, because it's like there's a lot that you can do to lose 5 pounds that is not sustainable long term. Like,
Mhm.
you could literally just stop eating for 3 days, but you
Yeah.
can't do that for 365 days. And
No.
it's like the same thing in business where I think when we over focus on the numbers, it's like, yeah, there's a lot that I could do to bring in some quick cash, but are those the same actions that I want to be taking every week of the year?
Yeah.
Like, is it a
Totally.
sprint pace or is it a marathon pace? Is it short term or is it sustainable?
Yeah. And I think that's where it can be so easy to get burnt out when we're in that lack chasing numbers, need mentality, not realizing, you know, there's an energetic component, there's a being open to receive component, there's a mindset component, there's all these different components just within yourself to bring into alignment to make that like flow easier. But again, when we're really living in our head and we go from chasing calories, chasing the number on the scale, and then it, like you said, it just transmutes into chasing numbers, it can just feel like it just gets muddled, I guess you could say, until you start to realize that there's a deeper level of power and intuition to step into.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious, in the work that you're doing, I think especially when you're working with female clients, how often is burnout a part of things? And how often do you see that your clients aren't honoring their cyclicality and they're trying to treat themselves like robots that have like the same amount of energy and the same needs every single day of the month?
Yeah, like 100% all the time, right? Everyone's on the back burner. Everyone's burnt out. Everyone has adrenal fatigue and like countless hormone imbalances, gut issues, fatigue, brain fog, fertility issues, chronic pain, headaches, right? Like it's, we've really been conditioned to put ourselves last and to be in this hustle energy. And especially when you are running a business, like if you haven't dealt with your insecurities, you will want to people please like crazy, and that's going to burn you out. And thinking that you have to be at your clients or your patients beck and call 24/7 is going to burn you out for fear of if you're not there, they're going to leave, and then where are you going to make the money, right? So I think it's so important, regardless of, I guess, any woman's background that comes in, if there's unworthiness and they don't feel good enough, they'll be people pleasing, improving, and perfection mentalities. And that all fuels the burnout. And then, of course, the self sabotage with food and then trying to gain control over the weight. It's very exhausting to just go back and forth in those cycles of restriction, diets, losing control, falling back into the binges and the self sabotage, and then trying to course correct again. It's draining. That's why when I did my first hormone test, my cortisol, which is the stress hormone, was 2000. And then the normal, like where it should be here in Canada, is about 400. I don't know how I was like surviving through that, to be honest, because that was the most insane reading I had ever seen.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. So I'm curious, you're in an industry where, there's a lot of marketing around quick fixes and just the outcome of losing weight or getting like the beach body. And you're talking about healing burnout and, like tapping back into your intuition and like knowing what feels good for you and like obviously also getting the outcomes, right? Also having the body that you want. But
Mhm.
what I've learned, and it's the same in my industry too, where it's like, 10K in 10 days challenge. And
Yeah.
and I've just found that anything sustainable takes some time.
Hmm.
So, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you market yourself in a way that brings in your ideal clients?
Yeah. So, number one, I don't do any of the quick fix, like you're going to lose a certain amount of pounds or something like that in a certain amount of time, because I I try to educate people on how to, like, point out the quick fix stuff to avoid it. So for me, my marketing is really around relatability. It's really heart led in the sense of like, this is what I've been through. Have you gone through it too? Are you willing to be in the long game, the lifestyle change game, where you address the roots? Because if you address the roots, that's where you're going to gain the traction and the healing and the freedom, rather than wasting another 10 years, 5 years, 3 years being in the same cycles, wasting more money that you don't need to, right? So it's really, part of it is about helping the woman feels safe and heard and that she can relate. And then the other part of it is the calling out of the ego that's like, well, what is it going to cost you to stay in this cycle? You say you know what you need to do to change, but if you really did, wouldn't you be doing it? Right. And getting out of that, helping them to get out of that denial that there's not really anything wrong, and that, the diet is the answer, and really helping them understand, like, on a deeper level, that it's not. So I think for me it's like a nurturing game. That's why I have my podcast, and like I'm constantly sharing things on my Instagram and my newsletter to really help them like open up to the deeper level of what's going on inwardly, emotionally, physically, and energetically.
Yeah.
And it works because people can relate, and all it takes is for you to touch them in the way they need to be, on the right, like on the inside they shed a tear, they feel like, oh my gosh, this is so me, and then they come forth into whatever they see fit.
Yeah. You said something interesting, which is like helping people realize that there kind of is a problem. And I do feel, I mean, you're in Canada, I'm in the US, so I don't know if there are any cultural differences, but I feel in general that we've normalized like having issues with
Mm-hmm.
gut, having issues with diet, having issues with weight, not liking the way that you feel in your body.
Yeah.
Like women are like, "Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, of course. Isn't that how everyone feels?" As though that's normal, and that's not normal.
No, it's the same here. Yeah. Totally. And I think, one of the last things that I had to clear when I was healing my relationship with food was the enabling trigger, which is, well, if I do it with my friends, then it doesn't count. If we're all talking about the same struggles and then it doesn't count. Right. And then you start to accept these struggles, the symptoms, the self-sabotage as normal, when it should have never been normalized. Like, you listen to Spotify and the ads, like, just go ahead, eat the pint of ice cream. You've got YouTubers with competitive eating channels where they're eating like inhumane amounts of food. Like, there's all of these different things that get conditioned into our subconscious that we're like, oh, well, but they said that's okay, and these people are doing it, so it's not really that big of a deal. And what we really have to understand is, no, it is a big deal, and it's your health and well-being. And we don't want to take that lightly. So I think we need to stop normalizing emotional eating and symptoms and all these things, and be willing to see them not as a problem, but actually as a teacher. Because your emotional eating triggers are a teacher, your money blocks are a teacher, your weight loss blocks are a teacher, your gut symptoms are a teacher, right? So it's like, are you willing to, instead of wanting to go chase the quick fix dopamine high, be willing to take that longer game and start looking at, okay, well, what are your emotional eating triggers? Why do you have these lack mentalities with money? Let's look and see why your hormones are off and why you are addicted to people pleasing. And then as they do so, and we shift the perception of things being a teacher and a guide, it really, to me, is more empowering and inspiring, rather than claiming I have this problem or latching on to, like, you'll never see me use the word eating disorder. And part of the reason I don't is because, number one, it feels very dense, heavy, and permanent, and I don't like the energy it emits.
Yeah.
And number two, I truly, for the most part, like, I don't feel that it just feels so permanent, and I don't feel any of it is, because I've healed so many deep struggles with it myself and helped thousands of others. And so I just like to take off those like emotionally charged words, because otherwise people will cling to, well, I have this issue, so I'm going to have it forever. And it's because of this issue that this isn't working out for me. And it's like, no, it's not. Let's shift that. Right.
Yes. Amen. I could not agree with you more. And, when I created the Money Wounds quiz and Money Wound Medicine, it was that same feeling. Like, I do feel that it's super helpful to get to the root cause of like what's
Mhm.
actually going on. But it's a super important distinction to realize that you are not your money wound. And it's
Yeah.
like, I saw like other money archetype quizzes or whatever where it's like, I'm the celebrity this. And it's like, no, you're not any of that shit. That's just a label. But
Yeah.
it's like, if you know what wounds you have or which wounds have been a trigger in the past, then it's like that can empower your healing. rather than
Yes,
be this badge or this label that becomes, a part of like a victim story.
totally.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I know when I did a bunch of inner child healing and was like working on healing like mother wounds and father wounds, it surprisingly really changed my relationship with food. It was like one of these unexpected outcomes. I
Mhm.
and it made me believe, I've seen this now so many times in so many things that it's all connected. Like
Yeah.
your sex life, the way that you feel about your body, the way that you eat, the way that you think about yourself, the way that you relate to people in your family, your money story, it's all connected. We can try to silo it, but it's
Yeah.
but it's not. It's not siloed. And so I'm curious, if you can just share like some of the ways that you see that interconnectedness and how you work through it with your clients.
100%. And the wounded inner child plays such a huge role because the wounded inner child is often is what is amplifying the ego, that negative voice in the mind that's encouraging you to keep justifying, well, it's only one more binge, it's not a big deal, or why you should keep blaming everyone else for your like issues and going, I emotionally ate because my boss was really mean to me today. It's their fault, right? That wounded inner child, that fat, ugly 5-year-old me internally, I carried her for 20 years before I started connecting with her and talking to her and helping her feel safe. Because a lot of the reason why we will self sabotage with food is because we don't feel safe feeling our emotions. We don't have healthy ways to process, feel, and release that which doesn't serve us. We fear getting uncomfortable because we live in such a quick fix society where it's like, no, just distract yourself from all of it. And we've been taught not to feel because you need to be strong. So, this inner child connection is so important, whether it was you last week or you 20 years ago, to connect with this part of you that is in there that wants your love, that wants your validation, that wants to be heard and supported and nurtured. And as we connect with that part of us and deal with these wounds and we help her feel safe, that tames that negative voice and a lot of these negative beliefs we have, obviously, as we're filling this void and working through healing our relationship with food or whatever it is. Um, so to me, that work is really important, to connect, to think of a scenario, a memory, a circumstance that really vividly stands out for you that triggers all these emotions like guilt, sadness, grief, worry, shame, whatever it's been, and to actually go in and talk to that part of you. You may even want to walk through that experience again and just be there with your inner child and let her know that she's safe, and that everything's going to be okay and you're going to learn different things from it and that you give permission to let it go. It really helps us fill the void, the lack of self love that we're trying to fill with food. When we do the inner child work. So that was a big thing for me as I was healing my relationship with food. I did a lot of inner child connection. As I've healed my relationship with money, I've done a ton of inner child connection, especially going back to 18 when I had a credit card and went on a lot of shopping sprees I shouldn't have because I wasn't paying the bill, and all of the like conflict that created because I didn't know how to be like mindful at the time, right? So it's a big part.
Mm. Do you have kiddos now of your own?
No kids, not
Okay.
not yet. We'll see. The business right now, hubbies and mine's businesses are our babies.
Mm. Yeah, I get that. I was just curious because, man, now that I have kids and like my youngest is 5, it's like it breaks my heart all over again when I hear about people's experiences. Like when I think about you getting bullied at that young age, and like I look at how sweet and innocent my 5-year-old is,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it just I don't understand how anyone could ever say something so hurtful to a little kid like that.
Right, I know. I know when I see young kids too, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I hope no one ever does to you what they did to me."
Right.
Just like, protect this little one, protect them.
I know. Well, and that's like the weird thing as a parent too, is like even knowing everything that we know, I'm like, "Oh yeah, they're still gonna have stuff."
Yes.
And that's just part of the human experience. Like they are
Yes.
going to have to go through and reparent their own inner child
Yes.
because it's not about having the perfect parents. It's about going through the process and learning how to give yourself that love and that encouragement that you
Mhm.
wished someone else would have given you.
Exactly. And we all are here to go through different experiences, and we can't control, right, that fate of the child or our loved ones, because it's each of our individual lessons to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to dive more into money and like what were some of the money wounds that came up for you on this entrepreneurial journey? What were some of the limiting beliefs that you had to work through and overcome?
Yeah, so one of the biggest limiting beliefs was, or two, it's like too good to be true to last. And then the other one was, it's like I'm spending it faster than I can make it. And I really think that for me, one of the biggest wounds or like fears was just like fear of it all like evaporating one day, and it like having to shut down my business and go and get a job. And just being like, well, okay, well, number one, why would that happen? Like, if this is what I meant to do, and why am I creating that story? And I think a lot of it came from when I had just graduated high school and moved out, and I was going to college for broadcasting before the 180 happened. And then the summer came, and I was trying to find a job in my city. And my dad's like, if you can't find a job, you're going to have to move home and come and work for me. And he owns like a fabrication metal business. I'm like, as if I want that. Like, that's not what I want at all. And so there's just that like voice in the back all the time being like, you got to pound the pavement. You better figure it out, because otherwise you're going to have to move home. And to me, that was like the ultimate like failure, right? Of having that happen. And so I think that fueled a lot of fear and lack around money, and oh my gosh, I hope this works. And having not a lot of trust and faith in myself and my abilities. I think there was also like the avoidance. So when my bank account would go into the red, I wouldn't want to go look at it or deal with it, because it just felt really stressful and I didn't really know what to do. And so really starting to look at money, to connect with money, to look at expenses, to understand where my money was going, to be grateful for what was coming in and grateful what was going out, and to be more mindful with spending. Because I used to essentially be in the mentality of, more so when I first started my business, I'm not like this anymore. I'm all for nice things. Like, I have a really beautiful dream vehicle that I had a goal of wanting to get. However, I didn't get it because I need to prove to people that I've made it. So what I used to do when I first started my business is think, well, I've got to go and buy like the designer purses, the designer shoes, make my life look like I've really made it so that I can prove and show people, right? So those are some of the things that I've really worked on shifting over the years. And what I value is a lot different now. Like, again, there's still some nice things, but to me, like, what I value a lot more than being flashy is inner peace and stability and feeling confident with my relationship with myself and my money and my business.
Yeah.
That feels a lot better than needing to go improve something. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things that I've really had to work through, and like just really trusting the universe, trusting myself, trusting like the flow and the path of the business,
Yeah.
because it shifts, it changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, did you have anything in your childhood that registered to you as abandonment?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So even though I was never abandoned, I think that being that my mom, I think after she got her diagnosis, and she got it before I was born, but because she never learned how to take care of herself, she never wanted
Mm,
to learn how to eat better or like do her deeper emotional work. Same with my dad, neither of them. So I think when I came into the picture, it's like my mom, in an essence, in some ways, is almost like a child again, because she's got this diagnosis and literally her whole body is like slowly declining, and she's slowly losing control over every aspect of her being. And
mm,
then my dad's on the other side of it with all of his like wounds and like, right, and I'm like in the middle being like, this is so sad, like I don't know what to do, like I feel abandoned, like I don't know who to turn to or who can really support me.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was curious because everything that you shared about money is like classic disappearing money wound. Like, it's too good to
Mhm.
be true. The rug's going to get pulled out from under me. The money is going to go. So therefore, I'm going to subconsciously sabotage. Like, I'm going to spend it all before it practically even hits the account so that
Yeah,
it can't leave me. And it's like the
yeah,
root of all of that is abandonment. It's like,
totally.
yeah. So thank you for sharing all of that because
Yeah.
it's super common. And
Yeah.
and this is where like I'm so passionate about the work with money because it's like just making more money doesn't fix that.
No.
Not even a little bit. But that's what we're taught to do is like, well, just make more. It just needs to be a bigger number, set your goals higher. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, 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 this has nothing to do with the money. This has to do with
Oh,
feeling abandoned and not trusting in the money and not being in relationship with it.
yeah, 100%. And I can tell you, like, the times where I've had the most money in my bank account, I'm like, oh, like, once I have this amount, then everything will be great. Just like the scale thing. And it's like, it didn't fix anything. And
Yeah.
like, that number is not helping me, like, you know, with my attachment issues or my lack of trust and faith because it's still there, right? So it's where like we can't stress enough how important it is to do the inner work because these things will keep coming up and nothing external will like build the trust and faith in yourself and in the
Yeah.
money and any of the healing we're doing for that matter.
Yeah. Absolutely. I read Women, Food, and God by
Oh,
Janine Roth. Do you like that book?
yeah, I read it too when I was doing my healing.
Yeah, and, there's just, like, a few things in it that stick out to me, but I remember her at one point also talking about how, it's like she looked in the mirror and, like, turns out, like, still hated the 120-pound version of
Yeah.
herself, and yeah, it's like you say, same thing with the bank account, like, that number isn't gonna magically make you feel totally different on the inside unless you've done the inner work independent of
Yeah.
stacking cash.
100%. And to not then get upset or make it mean something wrong when you have an ebb.
Yeah,
Right? I had to work on that too because I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, it dropped. This isn't good. I don't feel good anymore." Right? So again, like really detaching and choosing like, "No, I'm safe and everything's good no matter what that looks like."
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like everything in nature is cyclical.
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
nothing in nature is a graph that just looks like this straight line up and to the right. And yet
Yeah.
it, except cancer, right? Cancer is the only thing that just like grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and never stops growing. But everything natural in nature, everything good
Mhm.
has cycles. And the
Yeah.
more we can make that okay, the
Yeah.
more we can be in flow with just like the natural way of life and our part in it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So as you may know, I'm big on financial transparency on this show. So can you share like as it, you had a six-figure year, you've done all of this work around money. How much are you making in your business now?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. Every year in my business, I have grown. So I had a record $250,000 year last year. And what's
Woo!
interesting and to get vulnerable is this year's been quite different. And
Mm,
I think it's because I had to do a lot of healing, even deeper healing with like learning how to allow flow, surrender, and be in a level of trust and faith that I've never been in with my business. And I actually think I had to surrender and vulnerability with my husband because he owns a business and has had it for about 6 years and been full time for 3 years. And I was convincing myself I've got to always just be positive about my business and my money because I don't want him to get worried
mm,
and have doubts or question his stuff. And then this year, just early in the year, I had 3 of the lowest months I've ever had in my business. And it's like I needed that to happen to fully be brought to my knees and to surrender and like be fully vulnerable with him
mm.
and receiving that support and seeing how supportive and nurturing he was through the whole thing was like the most incredible healing experience for me because I really was like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to be so judged if it's never just improving. And then it's funny because right after that happened, then things like picked back up again. So I'm a little bit less than last year, but it was like such a ride to have that experience so unexpectedly happen and then receive the gift of being so supported by the masculine and being able to surrender more into my feminine
Yeah.
and just not need to have it all together.
I love that. Yeah, and it's like multiple things can be true at the same time. 2023 has not been a great year economically. And what I see a lot in the coaching space is like, well, we create our own reality, so we're just going to like pretend that we're not in a recession.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, there are some businesses that absolutely crush it in a recession. That is true, and we can be one of those businesses. And it can also be true that like global financial circumstances are different this year than they've been. And
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah. Totally. I agree. And I think it's like finding that balance where it's like, yeah, totally. The reality is this is definitely a different year for that. And then also going like, well, I don't need a million clients though, right? It's just, but it's true. And I think that's where I held a lot of shame and guilt around the beginning of my year for a little while. And I'm like, I've got to forgive myself. I've got to let this go. I didn't do anything wrong. Like
Yeah.
it happened, and can
Yeah.
I accept it, let it go, and move forward? Um, because I think it's important for us to also go, okay, what's not working in my business? What is? What did I maybe take on from certain classes, coaches, things that like actually isn't resonant for me? Why am I doing that?
Yeah.
Why am I not doing this thing I used to do? And that's, I think what I've really learned this year is like from all the things I've inherited from others and what I love doing from my own heart is like a lot of that stuff that I've learned from others, I've let it go because it actually doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Um, there's been a huge learning like curve of when I've had mentorship to really be discerning of even if they're teaching this, telling me this, I actually don't have to do any of that because it doesn't feel right for me and it actually doesn't work in my business model.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, this podcast is called the Joyous Path to Millions podcast, and it's as much for me as it is for everyone else. But it's like, if we're not enjoying the journey in the way that we're making money, then it does not freaking matter what the destination is.
No.
And, like my coaching business is down this year versus last year. And it's like, who knows? There's still lots of time left. But
Yeah.
it's like we were talking about before. There are things that I was doing last year that I could force myself to do this year that probably would bring in more money. And everything in my body is like, no, I don't want to do that anymore.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I choose to
I
honor
feel
that. Like, I would so much rather be like, you know what? The business made whatever, 200,000 instead of 240,000, which like no one's actually sad for me about that. And I really enjoyed it.
yeah.
Versus like,
Yeah.
I grew year over year and I did a lot of things I hated. No.
I totally agree with you. And I think, yeah, that I was like, oh man, like I got to launch like 10 master classes and like 5 online programs if I want to up level from last year. And then I'm like, my nervous system's like, no, like we're not doing that this year. We're really going to feel into what feels right. Right. And how are we going to pivot and shift? And that's been so powerful because instead of tightly gripping onto this, like, these are the ways I make money and like focusing on this only, it's opening up to like, wow, what else have I not thought of? What else can I create?
Yeah.
And to not have that tunnel vision and that rigidity with how it's going to be created or when it's going to happen or what it's going to look like compared to last year. I think one of the worst things we can do is compare like the current to the previous year, especially if the previous year was better, because you can get down on yourself. And so I think it's like being flexible and open to like unlimited possibilities is really the key, especially, when you're in this phase of honoring your nervous system. Like, I just think
Yes.
that's the key. You have
Yes.
to honor your nervous system.
Absolutely. And it's like the story that we're telling ourselves is made up anyway. So why not
Yeah,
tell a good story?
exactly. That's such a good point.
It's like, don't tell the story of like why you're down and why it's not working. It's like, tell ourselves the story of how this is such a foundational year and how great it was to honor our nervous systems and our intuition and how it's setting ourselves up for so much long-term success.
Yes. Yes. And the authenticity, right? It's like really sitting with the offer or whatever it is that you're going to share and be like, am I doing this out of fear, lack, and desperation? Or am I really doing this because I feel like it's going to really help people? Because one of the things that I've noticed, and noticed, not judged, but is that there is this model that I'm seeing pitched. And it's like this model of, launching something like every weekend. Fair enough for those of people that are doing that, that's fine. But it's like just this constant launch. And then, yeah, like I made this much money in a minute. So like come and spend $500,000 on my coaching service. And then like I have all these other things. I don't know. It's like sucking the life out of the creativity and the heart led thing. Like I just feel authenticity has never been more important ever in business, especially if you're a coach or a mentor. People don't, I don't know anyway, I don't want to see, like, I'm not interested if all the person is doing is flashing their Stripe account. I really want to feel a connection with whomever I'm going to work with or be in a container with or in a community with, rather than that.
Amen. Well, you're one of the good ones, and I know everyone listening is going to want to connect with you and follow you. I know you've got a podcast as well, so can you share where people can connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. So everything is on the website at amberapproved.ca. The No Sugarcoating podcast is there to listen to, as well as all of your podcast apps. We go deep. I talk about all the stuff I've been through, and because I want you to know you're not alone. So you can check that out. If you're wondering if you are struggling with binge or emotional eating, I do have a free emotional eating quiz you can take, as well as the 30-minute body freedom consultation you can book if you want to connect and talk about support. And then I'm on Instagram. That's my primary social media spot where I hang out, and my handle is at Romaniuk. So if you want more insight, content, guidance, that is there for you too.
Amazing. And we have all of those links. They are in the show notes. So make sure that you go follow and connect with Amber. Amber, thank you again for being on the show. And my final question is, can you describe what is your joyous path to millions?
Honestly, it's honoring my body and like letting my body and my nervous system lead the way.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much for coming on the show. To everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in. All right, I hope you loved that interview with Amber as much as I did. Make sure that you go follow her on socials. You can tag Amber, you can tag me at @MakesMoney. Let us know that you listened to the show and share your top takeaways with us. Here were mine. Number 1, shame slay your numbers. Like, I loved that she just came right out with the fact that she'd gained and lost 1,000 pounds, that she'd spent 50 grand on binge eating. And so many people would hide that away. But it's like when you can just own it and transmute that shame into something that allows you to help other people, it's so powerful. Number 2, inner child healing. I loved that we went deep on this because to me, inner child healing just helps every aspect of your life. And it's such a worthwhile investment in time and energy. Number 3, it's all connected. How you feel in your body, how you feel about your body is connected to your romantic life, your business life, your money, everything. And so whatever feels most alive for you, whatever you want to work on, just find someone that cares and that knows that it's all connected. Because it really doesn't matter whether you're joining a program to work on your body or to work on your money or your business. If you're working with someone who gets it, everything is going to get better through that program. Number 4, cyclicality. Honoring the fact that nature has cycles and our business has cycles and our body has cycles, and that's okay. And when you're in a winter kind of a season or you're in an ebb in your business, not making that mean something negative about you. And number 5, nervous system regulation. Just what a gift when you can go through life and experience even the negative things with this feeling of like, I can breathe through this. I can trust myself through this. I know that I can get through this and I'm going to be just fine. That's nervous system regulation. And man, does it make life a much more enjoyable experience. So those were my favorite topics that we covered today. I would love to hear yours. Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and I'll see you soon. Listeners like you have made this a top 3% global podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share, and leave a review. I also love hearing listener feedback, so feel free to slide into my DMs on Instagram @mmakesmoney. If you would like to explore hiring me as your money healer and business mentor, hit the link in the show notes or head to explore.emilywilcox.com. Until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes on your joyous path to millions.